25 days ahead of Election Day at a crucial time for both campaigns. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are both on the campaign trail, talking to voters today and looking ahead to November. It's no secret there will be a massive gender gap at the ballot box, with Harris strongest among women and Trump strongest among men. Check this out. A recent New York Times Siena poll had Trump up 11 points among men and Harris up 16 points among women. That's a 27-point gap, which brings us to a point our friend Chuck Todd brought up in his column last month. We're going to talk to Chuck momentarily. Chuck wrote, quote, "It's obvious at this point that Trump will win men by close to double digits, ditto with Harris among women. The question is how well each campaign does with its weaker gender." With that in mind, the two campaigns have taken a much different approach to their respective weak spots on gender. The Harris campaign appears to have launched a multi-pronged effort to reach out to men, highlighted by remarks last night in Pittsburgh by former President Barack Obama, specifically targeting black men.
I'm sorry, gentlemen. I've noticed this especially with some men who seem to think Trump's behavior, the bullying and the putting people down, is a sign of strength. And I am here to tell you that is not what real strength is. It never has been. Real strength is about working hard and carrying a heavy load without complaining. Real strength is about taking responsibility for your actions and telling the truth even when it's inconvenient. Real strength is about helping people who need it and standing up for those who can't always stand up for themselves.
Now, the vice president herself will look to further her reach with black men during a Detroit town hall on Tuesday with radio host Charlamagne Tha God. Meanwhile, Harris's running mate Tim Walz is also on the trail today, where he's in part leaning into his credentials, not as a former congressman or governor, but football coach. Later tonight, he'll be attending homecoming at the Minnesota high school where he served as a defensive coordinator. And he sat down for an interview with NFL Hall of Famer Michael Strahan, where he said his coaching experience has prepared him for the presidential ticket.
Well, I think it's about building teams, about bringing diverse folks in, finding where their skills work. I feel like I'm on a championship team with Vice President Harris, but it's that idea of molding, shaping, providing guidance, but understanding that you're just a piece of it. The players got to play. I always said you've got to put them in a position to be successful. And I think where you see these positions, whether it's governor or vice president, got to put the American people in a position to be successful, and they'll do it. They'll do it.
The Democratic appeals to masculinity decidedly different than former President Trump's, whose campaign appears to be all in on appealing to men with interviews on male-friendly podcasts and to focus on toughness in his speeches and downplaying any weaknesses with women. At several campaign stops this week, Donald Trump repeating his message that he knows what women want.
A guy came up to me today. He said, "Sir, you really should be nicer to her. The women won't like it." The women want safety, and the women want to have a country that they can be proud of, I think. They want to see a country that works, and we're going to have a country that works very, very soon. And the women are going to like Trump. I think they like me anyway. I think it's all bullshit, you know? They make it up. They said the women don't like me. I think women love me because they want to be safe. And with me, they're safe. With other people, they're not safe. It's true.
However, in a sign that the campaign may be feeling the heat on the gender gap, we learned today that Trump will hold a Fox News town hall next week in Georgia with an audience entirely composed of women. And with that, let's bring in our NBC News reporters. Gabe Gutierrez is following the Harris campaign. Garrett, Haake is in Aurora, Colorado, where the Trump campaign is holding a campaign rally. Gabe, it sure looks like the Harris campaign is basically acknowledging that they have a problem with men, an enthusiasm problem with black men. Take us inside your conversations with your sources in the campaign. What are they saying about this?
Oh, hi there, Kristen. Well, you touched on some of the issues that they've had over the last couple of weeks and actually over the last couple of days. Former President Obama, speaking yesterday at that rally, was candid, but he was even more candid in the event, a campaign stop that he had right before that rally, where he was speaking to voters, and he acknowledged that there was a lack of enthusiasm, especially among young black men. And he also suggested that it might be possible the reason some black voters don't support or may not support Kamala Harris is because they are uncomfortable with the thought of a woman president. So these are very candid conversations, Kristen, and the campaign is leaning into them, especially next week, as you said, plans to hold a town hall type event with Charlemagne the God, who, by the way, a popular radio host who had been extremely critical of President Biden and has been critical of messaging from the Democrats. The campaign trying to reach his listeners. Kristen.
You know, Gabe, it's interesting. Speaking of the strategy from the Harris campaign, we know Tim Walz is doing a lot more media appearances, as is the vice president, as you just noted. Is this effectively an admission that their strategy has not been working?
Well, look, he does have a string of media appearances coming up. He's set to appear on Fox's Sunday show for the second straight week this weekend. And look, the campaign, from the beginning, think about this, Kristen. Tim Walz, a governor of a state, not a whole lot of foreign policy experience, not a whole lot of experience on the national stage, even though he was in Congress. They're kind of trying to let him get warmed up, and now they are bringing him out more because they also realize that he could help them in those critical blue wall states where Tim Walz, he was campaigning in Michigan today. Let's take a listen to what he had to say there.
Just yesterday, Donald Trump was in Detroit, and he said, our whole country will end up being Detroit. You're going to have a mess on your hands. But if the guy would have ever spent any time in the Midwest, like all of us know, we'd know Detroit's experiencing American comeback and renaissance. Look, I'm a Twins fan, and you whipped our ass. We know where this is. Detroit's there, so we know. City's growing, crime's down, factories are opening up. But those guys, all they know about manufacturing is manufacturing bull every time they show up.
So yeah, Kristen, the Harris campaign hoping some of that Midwestern charm shows through, and overall they are really ramping up their travel over the next couple of days, both with former President Obama, a powerful surrogate, and also former President Clinton joining the campaigning in places like Georgia and North Carolina, making a push for rural voters next week as well, Kristen.
Yeah, those big names, the closers in the Democratic Party. Garrett, let me turn to you. Let's talk about those gender gap numbers. Former President Trump taking a very Trumpian strategy, basically digging in his heels, suggesting and quite frankly saying out on the trail he's not buying it. He thinks women love him. He thinks they care about issues about the economy, where, of course, polls show he does do better. Is there a strategy here with Trump, or is this just about turning out his base, Garrett?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both, Kristen. I mean, his campaign takes a little bit of a more nuanced view here, and they would tell you that, you know, on the economy, for example, women make most of the household spending decisions in households across this country, so that they think their messages on high prices in particular is something that might still appeal to female voters. We've talked about this before, the idea of Trump sort of reaching out to pull in male voters and instead kind of hoping that the Biden campaign, now the Harris campaign, would push female voters into his camp, that they might feel that the policies on the border or crime or public safety in general might allow more female voters to kind of drift away from Harris into his camp. The other part of this is they believe that in this incredibly small world of voters who are still persuadable in this election, that the majority of those out there who haven't made up their mind or who could conceivably convinced to come out to vote are men. And that the universe of people that they're even still talking to in mid-October are men, not women. And so to the degree there is a strategy here and not just playing the cards you're dealt, I think that's where it is for the Trump campaign.
And Garrett, you're there in Aurora, Colorado. What is Trump's message there? What are your key takeaways so far from what you're hearing from the former president?
Yeah, look, I mean, a lot of the crime and safety kind of linked to the border language that we've heard from Donald Trump in so many stops, I would say he's ratcheted it up even another level. He was just talking about the idea of American communities being invaded and conquered by migrants. That's pretty hyperbolic even for him, frankly, on this topic, and that's the way he's describing Aurora, Colorado. Now, look, I interviewed the Aurora police chief before this event started. He said, we've had issues with gangs. We have issues with crimes in this city, 400,000 people, like any other city. but it is not in line with the way Donald Trump describes it. Kristen, I think about the way in which in the last couple of elections we found ourselves talking about migrant caravans and things of that nature in the final weeks. I see this as a similar kind of tactical choice by Donald Trump to paint a picture of a bleak American scene here when it deals with migrants and crime, and to make sure that that's the kind of thing in the minds of his voters and of persuadable voters as they're making their voting decisions these final weeks.
Yeah, I think you're right with your analysis there. Really quickly, Garrett, Trump is going to Coachella. Talk a little bit about that decision, obviously a deep blue state.
Yeah, not exactly a critical swing area in Southern California, but it is an area with a lot of Latino voters who've been emblematic of the kind of voters who have been shifting in some places by small margins, in some places by larger margins, in Donald Trump's direction. I put Coachella in a similar boat with where we are now in Aurora and some of these arena tours that are going to be in bluer states, where the Trump campaign seems to be banking on the idea that he gets more media, more coverage, more in line with kind of a national narrative by going to these places than he might by doing another event in another town in Pennsylvania, for example. It's a gamble. We're all going to find out how much it pays off in a few weeks, Chris.
We will for sure, Garrett. It's hard to believe we're less than a month out, just about 3 weeks away now. Garrett, thank you so much. Joining me now for some more insight is NBC News chief political analyst Chuck Todd. Chuck, congratulations on a great Senate debate in Maryland. We are going to get to that. But first, I want to ask you about where we started this broadcast, basically, the gender gap. We talked about your column, which you described the importance for each campaign, basically, of reaching out to their weaker gender. And we saw this on display yesterday with Trump and, frankly, with Obama, who had a very forceful message to black men. What do you make of both of these very different approaches?
Well, look, first of all, the numbers bear this out. In 2016, both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump got the exact same number with their weaker gender, 41%. And that net zero was actually bad for Clinton, right? Well, in 2020, Biden got 45% of men, but Trump got 42% of women. So a gender gap that was advantaged towards a wider gap of women. And what did we see? You saw Joe Biden win by 7 million votes. So this is the importance of just overperforming enough, right? So Trump is hoping to, it's non-college educated white women that he's hoping to convince that, hey, you may not like my abortion position, but what about this, and this? That's sort of a conversation with sort of working class women that he wants to have. And then you have this focus on men, particularly men of color, African-American men and Latino men. I will say this, I think it's an interesting decision by the former president to lean in and really sort of chastise. You know, I think it's a risk anytime you chastise a voter saying you're not thinking correctly, rather than being persuadable, right? I think that's a risk. I think I'm not alone here. A lot of people wondering, okay, I know that the former president believes this to his core, that this is a problem. I know that many Democratic strategists have done some focus groups where this shows up, where just a lot of working class men just don't believe a woman can be president. Hard stop. And that's true whether they're white working class or working class of color men. So I'm not saying it's not existed. The question is, talking about it, is that a way to persuade somebody, or does that get people to dig in?
Chuck, I had the same thought, and what's so fascinating, we did hear similar language from Barack Obama in 2012 when he spoke to black voters and said, get off your couch at the CBC dinner.
But it was different. That's get out the vote.
Yeah.
I thought, I know what you're talking about, right? When he says, go get your cousin, you know. But that was get out the vote. That wasn't telling them, you know, you're what you think is wrong. Right? That was, I think there's a distinction there. That would be my distinction.
Listen, I think a lot of people heard that language and thought it was a risk. It's a really fascinating point. I do want to turn to your Thursday night. You were moderating the Maryland Senate debate. And, of course, you have Larry Hogan trying to make the case, I'm a moderate. Angela also Brooks saying, don't buy that. He's a Republican. I'm going to play a little bit of a clip from the debate and talk about it on the other side.
Can voters really believe you'll be an independent if the Republicans are paying for your TV advertising?
Well, I think the voters of Maryland know me, and they know my proven track record of standing up to Donald Trump, to Mitch McConnell, and to the Republican Party. I've probably stood up more than anyone in America. I'm not a MAGA, Donald Trump, Mitch McConnell person, as my opponent would let you believe.
Chuck, what did you make of that response, and what were your key takeaways overall?
Well, look, I'm always hesitant when you're, right, you know this feeling, right, when you're involved in it.
Yes,
sometimes
fair.
you don't get the same impression that somebody gets on TV, right? It can be a lot different. Look, I thought it was, what I took away from it is that they were both speaking to the same voter. You know, they were both trying, you know, because they were very complimentary of each other, right? While they would take shots at each other, in the next breath, they'd say, you know, I believe Governor Hogan would do this, or I really respect Angela Alsobrooks. You know, they would both go out of their way to say that because they don't want to offend this last voter. I think that the last voter here is somebody who really liked Governor Hogan as governor and doesn't trust Republicans to control the Senate, right? It's this, and this is what Alsobrooks is trying to exploit, and Hogan is trying to convince them, hey, I'm not going to be a rubber stamp for the Republicans. But I think that they both were trying to talk to that same voter. To get really local here, I think it's a voter in Montgomery County, if you're wondering. But I think that's the voter they're talking to.
Well, Chuck, you did a great job with the debate. Anyone who hasn't seen it yet, pull it up, because you covered a really wide range of topics, including, of course, reproductive rights, even transportation. So I think a lot of people will appreciate the conversation. Chuck, Todd, thanks so much.
You got it. Well, candidates accepting the premise of debates and talking issues helps too. And the two of them, look, whatever you think of them, the two of them accept the premise, and it makes for a better debate.
It was. They were both incredibly engaged and willing to answer your questions. So it was a great conversation, Chuck. Thanks so much.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app, or follow us on social media.